GoForThe2.com in with the Week 10 predictions for the college football season. Some great games on tap. We'll jump right into it in the ACC. Clemson last week pulled off the 37-34 victory over 12th-ranked Florida State. They were on the ropes, but when push came to shove, Deshaun Watson and that offense came through with a clutch touchdown to leg it in the closing minutes of that ball game. And more importantly, their defensive front seven stepped up with 6 total sacks on DeAndre Francois. They were able to force turnovers. They did have a big interception and jumped out to a 14-0 lead on Florida State. Had to weather the storm on the road and made plays when they had to pull off that victory. They now come back home to face a rested Syracuse team that is coming off a bye week. Syracuse last year gave Clemson a lot of headaches in the Carrier Dome last year. For much of the first half, Clemson trailed that battle in the Carrier Dome before pulling away for the road victory, but it wasn't an easy game. And now Syracuse comes to Death Valley. A lot of people are expecting an emotional letdown after the Tigers' road victory last week in Tallahassee. I don't see it. I think this is a bad matchup for Syracuse overall. I look for the Clemson Tiger defensive front seven to wear down Syracuse's offensive line. I look for Dungy to make mistakes, and I look for Clemson to win the turnover battle in this ballgame. More importantly, is Syracuse defensive secondary very, very inconsistent. I think that's where Clemson has the advantage. I look for Mike Williams. I look for Leggett, Deion Kane, Ray McLeod to break out. And I do think that Dabo Swinney has his teams focused in this battle. I think they dominated at home. I see Clemson winning this ball game by 35 points or more. I just think that Clemson is focused after that victory on the road in Tallahassee, and they made plays when they had to. Look for them to dominate from start to finish in this battle, and Clemson moves on to week number 11 undefeated with a 35-point or more victory over Syracuse in this ballgame. Another intriguing battle is Auburn and Vanderbilt. Auburn, the Gus Bus continues to roll with a solid road effort over Ole Miss, 40-29. It was a back-and-forth affair, but Auburn's defense did give up 435 passing yards to Chad Kelly and 3 passing touchdowns. But they made plays as well on the road when they had to and really pulled out that victory. They were able to pound the football between the tackles with Petaway, with Johnson, and more importantly, they had continuity on the offensive line. They now come back home to play an SEC opponent in Vanderbilt, who's 4-4 overall, a blue-collar team that's going to want to run the football and keep this game in the low-scoring affair. You look at this battle overall, looks like Auburn should dominate. They've rolled over their opponents in recent weeks, but Auburn does have Georgia on tap the following week for a big rivalry game. It's the SEC's oldest rivalry game. I think Auburn wins this ball game, but I think it's a lot closer than people think. I think Vanderbilt, fighting for a bowl berth, will look to run the football, get into a methodical ball control attack. Look for Shermer. Look for those quarterbacks for Vanderbilt to stretch Auburn's secondary. They're giving up about 235 passing yards per game after last week's performance. And I look for Auburn to pick up a 17-point victory at home over Vanderbilt. Don't think it's easy. Think Vanderbilt's in this ballgame from start to finish. And more importantly, look for a letdown with Georgia on tap for Vanderbilt in this battle. Let's stick in the Big 12, an intriguing matchup. You have Kansas State and Oklahoma State. Kansas State did pick up a solid road victory over Iowa State, 31-26. Jesse Ertz and that offense wore down the Cyclones. They had to really weather the storm on the road. Iowa State made some plays to make that game close, but in the end, Bill Snyder and the crew move on. They're now at home facing a hot Oklahoma State team that pulled off a 37-20 dominating home victory over West Virginia and knocked out the Mountaineers from the possible playoff. They stepped up, they forced turnovers, but more importantly, Mason Rudolph was very consistent in the passing attack. He threw for 273 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. They now go on the road to Manhattan, a very difficult place to play. But I still think that Oklahoma State could possibly be the best team in the Big 12. They now only have 1 loss. Baylor has 1 loss. Baylor still has a tough November schedule, so look for Oklahoma State to be in this ball game, and I think they dominate from start to finish. I look for James Washington and Jalen McCleskey to put a lot of pressure on Kansas State's secondary. I look for Oklahoma State's offense to force the issue and dictate tempo in this matchup and force Jesse Ertz and that offense to play catch-up. Look for Oklahoma State to start fast and strike first and get Kansas State out of their game plan. In the end, I do think that Oklahoma State pulls out a 20-point road victory over Kansas State. I just don't think Kansas State has the offensive firepower to keep up, averaging around 350 total yards per game. You look at Oklahoma State, they're passing for about 330 yards through the air. I think it's a bad matchup, and I do think Oklahoma State gets a convincing double-digit 20-point victory on the road in Manhattan in this battle. Another solid SEC battle. Georgia, coming off a disappointing rivalry loss to Florida, plays a hot Kentucky team that is looking to possibly win the SEC East. They only have 2 conference losses. Florida plays Arkansas, so expect Kentucky to be in this ballgame. Georgia's not playing well over recent weeks, but I do think that they get healthy in this matchup. You look at Kentucky overall, they're allowing 196 rushing yards on the ground, and you look at Kentucky's offense overall, they're only averaging 181 passing yards per game. On the flip side, Georgia very solid in run support, only giving up 109 yards on the ground, and they could still pound the football with Sony Michel and Nick Chubb on the ground against Kentucky's front seven. Jacob Eason could break out in this battle. Georgia traditionally plays Kentucky very tough. They have Auburn on tap in the following week, so I expect Kirby Smart to have a solid game plan in place. I look for Georgia to dominate this battle. I think they get healthy on the road in Lexington and pick up a 13-point victory over Kentucky in that battle. Just don't think Kentucky matches up very well against the Bulldogs in this battle. Another intriguing Big Ten battle. Penn State coming off a dominating road victory in West Lafayette. Saquon Barkley rushed for 207 yards, 2 touchdowns. Trace McSorley played very well in the system. Penn State's offensive line really wore down Purdue for over 500 yards of total offense, 511 yards of total offense on that Purdue defense. It wasn't even close after the halftime was tied at 17 apiece. Now Penn State comes back home to face a rested Iowa team. Iowa has not looked good in recent weeks, but they're coming off a bye. I expect Kirk Ferentz to have a solid game plan in place. And more importantly, you look at Penn State's defensive front seven. They're giving up around 183 rushing yards per game. Purdue could not take advantage of Penn State's inefficiencies on defense, but Iowa can. Iowa's running for around 169 yards on the ground. They have Wadley, they have Daniels, and that offensive line play has been playing very well over recent weeks. They now have an extra week of preparation. They're +7 in turnover margin, and their defensive secondary, led by Desmond King, matches up very well on the outside with Goodwin and the Penn State wide receivers. Penn State might win this ballgame, but I don't think it's as a blowout as a lot of people think. I think it might be 3 points, but I do, in fact, believe that Iowa will be in a position to strike the upset, and I'm calling for the upset victory Saturday night. Iowa knocks off Penn State 24-20. I think Iowa's in this game from start to finish because of their defense, and they do have an experienced quarterback in C.J. Beathard. He won't be fazed by the whiteout or by the atmosphere in Happy Valley. Iowa plays Penn State very tough and gets a solid road victory in Happy Valley this Saturday night. Let's stay in the Big Ten. Another marquee battle in Columbus, Ohio State and Nebraska. Ohio State got the 24-20 victory over Northwestern. Northwestern was in a position to possibly tie that ball game. Pat Fitzgerald chose to kick the field goal in that battle, a questionable call with a team that was really had the momentum at that point and had his offense on the field. He chose to kick the field goal and make it a 4-point game. J.T. Barrett was able to run out the clock, and Ohio State prevailed at home 24-20. On the flip side, Nebraska played Wisconsin very tough, pushed that game into overtime and lost that battle 23-17. They now go on the road again to Columbus, back-to-back road games. But if you're asking me, I was more impressed with Nebraska's loss on the road than I was with Wisconsin's victory in that battle. Nebraska's defense played very well. They held Wisconsin's offense to around 340 total yards and only gave up 114 passing yards to Bart Houston and Hornibrook. I think that's the difference in this battle. I like Nebraska's secondary in this matchup, and I like the wide receivers in Nebraska. I like Westerkamp. I like Alonzo Moore, and I like Stanley Jr. to put pressure on Ohio State secondary. You look at Nebraska, they're very solid in third down defense, only holding opponents to around 35% on third downs. They're opportunistic and positive in turnover margin, and they have an experienced quarterback in Tommy Armstrong that could be a hot quarterback. He's thrown a couple of interceptions over the last couple of weeks, but I still like his mobility on the road, and I expect Nebraska to be in this ballgame from start to finish this week. I think Nebraska pushes Ohio State to the limit. I do think they get the road upset in Columbus. Not sold on the way Ohio State's playing. Think it's a high-scoring game. Calling for the 37-30 Nebraska victory on the road in Columbus this Saturday night. I think Tommy Armstrong and Mike Riley get it done on the road in the Horseshoe this coming weekend. Another intriguing battle is Florida State and NC State. Florida State pushed Clemson to the limit. They weren't able to pull out that ball game. Now they go on the road to Raleigh. NC State coming off a disappointing home loss on homecoming to Boston College. They lost that battle 21-14. I picked Boston College last week. I thought their defense would keep them in that battle. Was NC State looking ahead to this week, though, against Florida State? Florida State's 5-3 overall. They have absolutely nothing to play for. No ACC title, no playoff. This team has been inconsistent all year round. DeAndre Francois got battered last week against Clemson's front seven. They now have to go on the road to Raleigh, where this team plays very well, traditionally, a very tough place to play. You look at Finley overall, the quarterback for NC State. He's a consistent passer, and that defensive front seven for the Wolfpack, very solid in run support. I think they can make that offense one-dimensional. I think they can contain Dalvin Cook. Even though Dalvin Cook's the best player on the field, he's shown inconsistency this year, only seems to step up in key ball games. Well, there's nothing to play for in this battle for Florida State but pride. That's something that they haven't shown in recent years and recent weeks. And more importantly, Florida State hasn't lost a back-to-back road game since 2011. But this is in South Florida. I look for NC State to dominate this ball game from start to finish. And I'm calling for the home upset by the Wolfpack this coming weekend. I think they knock off Florida State and hand the Seminoles their fourth loss of the year. I look for Days and Samuels, the running backs for NC State, to step up and make the plays. And NC State prevails in Raleigh in an ACC thriller. I think it's 34-28. NC State gets the home victory over the Florida State Seminoles. I'm going to give you one extra pick this week. It's because I really like this team. It's an ACC pick. Wake Forest at home against Virginia. Wake Forest did not look good last week at home against Army. Triple option gives a lot of defenses a lot of problems. Even though Wake Forest very solid in run support, they struggle with the triple option. Army was able to take advantage of Wake Forest's secondary as well. They now are at home. They're sitting at 5-3 and play a very solid Virginia team that I picked last week against Louisville. They played Lamar Jackson phenomenal at home in Charlottesville. They now go on the road to Salem to play Wake Forest. But I think Wake Forest gets it done in Salem. They're looking to become bowl eligible. I look for them, Hinton and Wolford, the quarterbacks, to stretch UVA secondary. And I do think that Wake Forest picks up a 13-point victory this coming weekend in Salem. 8 picks this week. Stay with me all season long on GoForThe2.com. You can listen this coming weekend, SB Nation Radio, 10 to 12 p.m., this coming Saturday morning. We'll break down every top 25 matchup this coming weekend. Fantasy Sports Radio Network as well. That's FNTSY.com/radio. All the picks, all the stuff is up on the website, GoForThe2.com. Have a great weekend, everyone.